What's that? Oh yeah, no, yeah, sure, no problem.
Sure, is that okay? Yeah, I just want to record to make sure
Yeah.
we have it,
Yeah.
for the record. Yeah. Well, that is quite a journey. I mean, what do you think was the impulse to get you into storytelling? What was there? It's hard to point to one thing, of course, but what drove you to East LA to tell that story? You know, what after you had already put in a full shift?
Yeah.
You know, and how does that connect to how you started as a writer?
Well, I just always think of the sorts of things that I want to read, right? Like, you know, so I felt like, okay, let me become really proficient or as proficient as I can be at kind of the meat and potato stuff. But you know, when I was covering a lot of the stories I was writing for on my beats, honestly, I probably, if I was a reader, I don't know that I would even really necessarily read them, to be honest with you. You know, I mean, I tried to make a labor strike between you know, bus and train drivers in LA versus the MTA exciting, but you know, I don't know. It's kind of hard to be excited about that. And even some of the, you know, I did do a lot of crime work too, and you know, I saw a lot of, you know, tough scenes, say, and throughout murder scenes, and I'd be on hand for that and had to write about that kind of stuff. But you know, I was never really, as a reader, I wouldn't tend to read those stories, but I would read the stories that really told you the backstory of why something happened, or you know, that really got underneath and really tried to tap into the humanity of what was going on. So I think that was the pull for me, is to try to go, just definitely to try to always go under the surface and try to find elements of humanity in everything that in all of my good stuff, all the stuff that I would read. So, you know, let's say when I was covering crime, I covered an execution at San Quentin in 2001 or so. Well, so those are really tough things, obviously, as a reporter to witness and to write about. And I wrote the execution story, but I also tried then to, I went and I tracked down all of the victims of this guy's Robert Lee Massey, and he'd committed murder, I think, initially in the late 60s or so. I went down and I tracked down his son. I found his son. I found another family, more victims. I told their stories, and I really told the stories of how these crimes had affected these families over generations. And then I interviewed Mr. Massey in a telephone interview from prison, and I tried to you know, really understand his past as well as I could too. And I tried to bring empathy to both, you know, to both sides, and to really understand like how somebody becomes what he became, and then how what he did affects people generations down the line. Now that's the kind of story I would read, because it's tapping into something that connects all of us, and that connects us into a sort of kind of a common humanity. And I'm just really big into that, and fairly idealistic about humankind and where we can go, even though it's kind of tough these days at times. But I come also from a very idealistic family, something that I've written about, and it's been written about me in the past, in that, you know, I'm biracial, and my folks were married in 1954, which is something I'm extremely proud of. You know, my dad is, you know, my late father, he passed away in 2006, you know, tall, dark skin, you know, black guy. And my mom looked like she could be like the kind of like, they're just very English, like she could be like from the English royal court or something, you know, like just totally in other words, two totally different kinds of people, totally different communities that they were raised in. And they married in 1954, which is the year of Brown versus Board of Education. And so extreme act of courage on their part, and that launched. But what that did for me was through my family, our lived experience was a really idealistic experience about what people could become, and overcoming the challenges faced by society. And I just really believe in that stuff. Maybe I'm naive, but I was just raised to believe that, and I absolutely then try to take that as part of my work. So whenever I'm with people or trying to tell their stories, I'm just trying to tap into that sense of empathy and trying to understand them as best I can, and trying to be open to their stories. So that's what I love about journalism, is just connecting with people, especially people that aren't like me, and people that are like me. And it's just a great search for me. It's partly personal. It's partly like me, like trying to discover myself in a way, so yeah, that's, sorry for the long-winded answer there, but
No, that's very telling, because that sort of empathy infuses your work, from the idea to the execution of that idea.
I hope so.
Yeah, is that something that you seek when you write, to express those values?
Yeah, definitely I do. And sometimes sometimes I do it better than others, but yeah, I think and now now in my current job, as a columnist in sports, I think one of the things, when I've just had this job as a columnist for a couple of months now. One of the things that I'm trying to do is that, I see in the overall sports landscape and the sports sort of pundit class that I'm now part of, it's usually a lot of like really, hard, heavy duty takes, and you have to have a hot take or whatever. You've got to be pissed off about something one way or the other. And I don't know, I'm trying to I want to be a little bit different again than that. And I want to be a little bit more thoughtful in this role as a columnist, and try to be forceful and firm with my opinions, but also understand that, first of all, I don't have all the answers. Like everybody else pretends like they have all the answers. And I want to understand even people that I'm kind of, even if I'm sort of bashing them. Like in a column recently, I was very critical of Justin Turner, the LA Dodgers player who came out on the field after his team won the World Series, and he didn't have a mask on, and that really ticked me off, because of just the symbolism of that, and him being a role model to so many people. And here I am with my fourth grader in the next room, and he can't go to school, and just all the thing, so it's just, that really made me mad, and I called him out for that. But I think in the column too, I expressed that I also tried to understand, where he was coming from, and I asked, it was an open letter. So I took kind of an open letter form where I was asking, writing a letter to him. And I tried to understand and empathize a little bit with where he was coming from. And so that's kind of an example of where I am with that, trying to be empathetic in this new role.
How did you hit upon that letter form for the Justin Turner piece?
Yeah.
It really, I mean, the piece does seem like you're writing to him personally. I mean,
Yeah.
It really has that sense of the individual to it. How did you hit upon that style?
Well, one of the things is I was coming to it a little bit late. Everybody weighed in on him like right away, as a lot of the sports press tends to do, like, right after it happened. So people were writing all these very critical things about him, and he shouldn't do this and he shouldn't do that. And I'm trying to, another thing I'm trying to do is maybe not always just weigh in right away. Just so I can kind of let me see how things play out a little bit. Let me not feel like I've got to have an opinion on the first day. So I wanted to see, first of all, was he gonna, maybe I don't know, maybe the test was going to come back negative, or as happened with Nick Saban earlier when I had written about Nick Saban, and then turns out, the test was inconclusive, and then the test was wrong. So I wanted to take a little bit of time, and when I by taking a little bit of time, then and I realized a lot of other people were bashing him. I wanted to have a different take in it, and I didn't want. So the form was a way to differentiate myself from everybody else. That was the primary objective there. So rather than just having another piece where you're kind of like, just laying it out, he shouldn't do this and why, maybe just by the form and the structure of the piece, then that can help it stand out 3-4 days down the line. And so that was really my first thought of, as I was thinking about doing it. And literally I started writing the column, and I started writing it in the traditional way. And then I looked at it, this is just it's not really that interesting. What am I going to do to make it more interesting and get people like interested from the first line, And so that structure, I think, was my attempt to do that. And it also sort of freed me up to write just a little bit more casually, maybe just like a real letter. I told myself that I was just writing him a letter and Manfred a letter too. And that just that definitely influenced how I wrote. So.
How do you find your stories? So we get into the craft of storytelling. It begins with the idea. Go through the process with us, how you find a story and make the decision to pursue it, and then craft it in your own style.
Yeah, boy, it's really a combination. It's a lot of times it's just keeping my eyes open for things that I think are are going to be interesting and different. So that's the primary thing. And that could be, let's say, I was at Wimbledon in 2019, and I got this idea to write about the hawk who patrols the skies of Wimbledon. So because on the grounds of Wimbledon, the backstory is that the grounds of Wimbledon, there is a hawk, Rufus the hawk, who they let out every single morning before play begins, and he goes and chases away all the pigeons. Because if they didn't have Rufus the hawk, then Roger Federer would be serving, and he'd be the pigeons would be dive bombing him or worse, right on his head. So I spent like 3 days. I spent like 3 days just chasing down the story of Rufus the hawk, and actually spending time with Rufus and letting him they let me hold him on center court. Actually, perched him on my arm. So that's just a totally different story. Like not too many tennis reporters are going to go out to Wimbledon and spend 3 days writing about a hawk. So, but you know what? The story turned out to be probably the most read story out of Wimbledon that year. Definitely one of them. So I don't know. It could be, again, that's just looking at something. What's going to be different? What am I going to want to read? I don't want to read just the standard stuff as much as possible. I want to read something that's interesting and that takes me into a different world, or brings me into a character who's really, really unusual. So a lot of it's just from me and from having that filter and having that mindset as much as I can. And then some of it is, of course, having good editors, and then, having good conversations and good communications with my editors. And a lot of times they'll come up with ideas and I'll just run with them. And then sometimes, especially now in this role as a columnist, I've just there's just certain things that I've got to weigh in on. So let's say, I don't know, if Tiger Woods wins the Masters this weekend, then I'd probably write about that, so that's just by necessity. So it's a real mix, but the backbone, again, I think, is just the filter of me trying to find stories that are a little bit different, or that'll just stand out. Let's say another example would be, let's see, from this year. I don't know if you saw the story about the hockey, the Stanley Cup hockey in championship in 1919, this was during maybe in the middle of the summer. everybody's writing pandemic stories. Sports world's really shut down. So I just figured I want to try to find a story to write about the virus in 1917, 1919, the so-called Spanish flu period. And I found out then about the Stanley Cup, which Stanley Cup in 1919 was played between the Seattle, happened to be a team in Seattle where I live, the Seattle Metropolitans and the Montreal Canadiens. And it turns out that series ended up being called right before Game 6, again in the finals of the Stanley Cup. And it was called because the players on both teams were getting sick. And then one player from the Canadiens, Joe Hall, ended up dying about 2 days after the Stanley Cup was called. So, no, I mean, I don't think that was nice to write a story like that because I know no other reporter is going to be interested in it. But I ended up telling this full tale. And I guess maybe one of the advantages of going after stories like this is that, especially when you're writing them as features, is that you know that you're not under the gun. Oftentimes you're not under the gun because nobody else is interested in them. And that means you have a little bit of time to develop them without worrying about somebody beating you to the punch. And that was certainly the case in this instance. So yeah, again, long-winded answers, and so stop me if I'm blabbing and going on too long. So, but
this sense of curiosity seems essential to your day-to-day operation. Were you always just curious as a kid and wanted to find out what makes people or things tick, and that is just carried through, or is it something you developed over time?
Yeah, no, I've always been just extremely interested in people, for people first, and just kind of like, I don't know, I was always curious about pretty much everything around me. I think too, I got to say again this, in terms of race, and there's a racial component in that, growing up biracial, especially, again, I'm 53, so I'm growing up in the late 60s and early 70s. I'm, in 1979, I'm 13. And this was before biracial was kind of cool and all that. Like, I was always definitely on the outside I was always an outsider with a foot in sort of the black world and a foot in the white world. And I was raised in white neighborhoods. And so I was always a little something different about my experience. And that taught me, I think, just again, a lived experience thing. That just taught me to I was always very observational and always questioning why things were the way that they were, because they didn't seem quite right. And I also didn't seem to, like, I don't know, I wasn't always really fully accepted. So I think that just kind of developed just that outsider's mindset. And again, I mean, obviously not everybody's going to have that sort of experience. It's pretty rare even these days. But I think, that particular racial experience. But I think that there's something to be learned from just kind of keeping that outsider's mindset. In the journalism world, it's definitely helped me as I've gone through my entire career. I still consider myself an outsider, very much so. So I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I like outsider outlaw sensibility.
Yeah.
Because you're giving the reader something that the reader didn't think of. And
yeah, try to. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
try to. Yeah.
I really do think that's, and that's important. I just think it's to keep that outsider approach.
Yeah.
It tends to generate stories that no one else thought of writing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How does it go from the idea to the screen when you start doing the reporting, Kurt, and then the writing? What's that like for you? You have to write you're at the top of the game. You're Roger Federer of journalism. So that there's a lot, there's some pressure there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is a lot of pressure. I mean, I try to report everything out pretty well. Even say a column, even say columns that don't where even something that doesn't quote anybody or have like an expert quoted, that's sort of just me. Again, in this column, in this life as a columnist. So in some of my columns so far have been that, just sort of me riffing and all that. But in those cases, even then, I don't write those until I've called two or three people, two or three experts to talk to them about my ideas. So almost everything is pretty reported. You know, I would. I rarely just go into something just with my own without reporting it. Just kind of slam down my opinion. So just deep reporting and definitely in the narrative and feature realm, those stories are really heavily reported. So I mean, I'm kind of known for going the extra mile on the reporting side in COVID, during COVID, partly because I have pretty bad asthma. I have not been traveling, right? So all of my, and also we have a little guy, so I've got to make sure I'm healthy, right? So, you know, let's say the Coach Adams story, which I think a lot of your students have read. The coach from Minneapolis. I did that. I did all of that through Zoom interviews, and I mean, I did like probably a dozen Zoom interviews with Coach Adams at length. I could have written probably 4 times what I wrote in that story, and it was a pretty long story for a column. I think it was close to 2,000 words and the columns are generally. It actually might have been 2,400 words. The columns are generally about 900 to 1,000, 1,100 range, but I got to spread my wings on that one because it was a feature. So, but the reporting was still very in depth, even in COVID, and even given the fact that I could not be there. So I not only talked to him. I mean, I talked to players, I talked to coaches. I mean, I just went until to the point where then I just really felt like, once I started writing and started figuring out how I was going to tell the story, I really understood it. I over-reported. So I feel like over-reporting is extremely important. Really knowing what you're talking about. Again, especially on the features when you have a little bit of time. And that helps with to write with authority and to feel like you're really knowing to really know what you're talking about and to really have confidence just seems to for me, it really frees me up. In a normal situation, I would have gone back to, pre-COVID, I would have gone back to Minneapolis and I would have spent probably 3 or 4 days with him. I like to do, I think because of my documentary training, working in documentary film before print, I like to spend a lot of time with my story subjects. So I will go and do a lot of fly on the wall reporting for the features. And I don't know if folks here read my Maya Moore stories from earlier this year and last year. That was a big feature about Maya Moore, the WNBA player, working to free an inmate in Missouri who she believed was wrongly convicted, and was wrongly convicted. So her leaving her career to help free Jonathan Irons, who she actually ended up marrying. But for that story, I went to Atlanta to be with Maya. I went to Jefferson City, Missouri to meet with Jonathan Irons in prison. I met Maya when she went to Portland to meet with Nike executives. And I had another visit. I actually had 2 visits to Missouri, to the prison. So, and again, okay, so that's unusual. I work for the New York Times. I've got a great budget, right? I can just go on these trips. But when I was a city reporter for in LA for the LA Times, and I'm just writing about the city, I mean, if I'm writing about somebody in East LA or South LA or Beverly Hills, whatever, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend, you would not believe the amount of time that I would spend with people, and to the point where they're kind of like getting tired of me. But then also to the point where when the story's over, sometimes subjects will kind of call me up because they miss having me around to talk to, and that's kind of when I know that I've done my job well. So the reporting in depth is obviously very important, and it's going to change too depending on the form that you're writing for. So now that I'm doing columns, I can't do that in depth work or reporting, but I'm still going to try to make a lot of calls and all that. Now the next step then is organizing the story. I don't really write without at least doing kind of a loose sketch of my stories. Hey Ash, you're on Zoom. Can you say hi? Hi. So okay. So I organize. I'll do just a quick outline. I'll do outlines that can be ranged from being very quick on a notepad to full in-depth outlines on the longer stories where I really know, okay, it's intro, and I start writing out like this is what the intro is going to be. Then this is going to be the question that I asked out of that intro. This is going to be my nut graph section. This is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to talk about in my nut graph section. This is going to be scene 2. This is going to be scene 3. This is going to be, so I'll have it all figured out before I start writing. So for me, that just helps me. I mean, I'm really lost because I don't know, maybe my ADD or whatever. If I don't do an outline, I really get scrambly, and I really get all over the place, and the writing suffers, and I've got to be pretty organized. And I think that's just knowing my brain type and having failed at enough stories where I didn't have an idea what I was going to say from beginning to end before I actually started doing the actual writing. Having failed enough times, I know that I just can't pull that off. And that's also one of the reasons too. It's like I don't consider myself a great like deadline writer, like on like super fast paced writing. Like like when I'm at an event and I've got to write a game story or something, like I remember I was at that Wimbledon, the Rufus the Hawk Wimbledon, and I had to write about the epic final that year between Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer. And I had to do a super tight deadline, like a couple hours, epic match. I struggle on those. I have to admit. I mean, I'm not great on that kind of stuff. Some people are, but I like to have just a little bit more time. It's just how my brain works, So yeah, that's kind of from conceptualizing the piece to making it work. And then I guess the last thing would be just, I usually do 1 or 2 drafts as well. It's like not like my first draft is, I put out that sort of shitty draft, as I call it, right? Everybody, pardon my, but my first draft, I just kind of try to go and just get it all out, and then I hone it down from there. So. Oh.
There we go. How did you come up with the word parable in the story about the football coach in Minneapolis? I mean, that's one word out of 2,400, but it stands out. It really carries a potency beyond the linguistic value of it in the sentence. How did that come about? It's funny. I mean, I gotta say,
there was a story I think about, I don't know, almost 20 years ago where I used something similar, and I thought of that as I was writing this piece, and I said, this guy he's a lot like, I don't know, it just reminded me of this sort of almost biblical figure kind of, and so I sort of went back to the well a little bit, and I thought it was just perfect. I don't like overuse that. So, I mean, I was just definitely thinking of this guy who's sort of like I don't know, he leads this whole community the way he does it. And he's also very like grounded and very like, very down to earth, not above at all. Just kind of like, the best of kind of what I think of like in the religious tradition of Christianity, I guess. But it could be, I mean, I think in Islam, Muhammad was also like very just down to earth and grounded. And that's sort of the, so that, I don't know, that was just my sense of Coach Adams. So it just felt like that his life was a parable. Like he's more than just this person. He's this force. So yeah, I was looking for a little bit of poetry there too. And so with every story, I try to have I try to find the right balance of having a little bit of poetry and not just being X happened, Y happened, Z happened. Have a great story and then wrap it up with a little bit of nice writing when I can. And sometimes, and also that's hard to find the right balance to not overdo it, so it gets in the way of the story, but just to have it just a little bit enough. And I think when you can do that, when you can pull that off, then it makes the reader sort of feel comfortable, like, oh, like they're in the hands of a person who's a good writer, and they're in good hands, so they can kind of continue with the story. And again, sometimes I'm successful with that, but not every time. And but that's the attitude that I take too, is that I'm gonna fail, and I've failed plenty, and I have plenty of stories that I'm kind of embarrassed by or that I've overdone. But then I try to learn from them. Even now, I'll get into these jags where are sort of like the period where I think, oh God, I feel like I'm really doing this too much, or I can just feel it, and then I don't know what it is. Maybe I'll feel like I'm putting too many adverbs in my stories, or I'm going overboard, or I'm not organizing my stories well enough. And then I'll go back, maybe when I feel that way, then I'll go back to maybe the last 2 or 3 stories, and I will literally, I'll go line by line, and I will study them and see what I've been doing. And oh shoot, no, yeah, I haven't been, doing. I haven't been asking the right questions, or I've been overwriting, or I haven't. My leads have been really kind of, average. So I'll go back and study stuff when I feel like I'm going off the rails a little bit.
What lessons can we take in this class from that? And that you're at the top of your profession, accomplished journalist, New York Times, ESPN, Los Angeles Times, yet you still have that desire to get better with every story. What lesson can we extract from that we can apply to our work?
Well, for me, I mean, that's the fun of it. That's the great challenge. That's a great challenge. And I think one lesson is, like, if you can adopt that mindset, like you're not a finished product ever, then honestly, it just makes the work more fun and more of a challenge, because I'm always on my toes. And I definitely feel I can sense that I'm improving, and that's a pretty good feeling. And I just like to have that. I like to keep that mindset. It might be too from my years in sports, just always working, always tinkering with something, always, oh, my forehand cross court is off. How do I get a little more spin on the ball? How do I get a little more bite on my down the line? I was still wondering that when I was, one of the better players in college, like still trying to, like, always just, how can I refine? How can I, and so I tried to then take that into my professional career, and I think it's really helped me just at every step. I mean, I think my bosses appreciate that I'm always looking for ways to try to get better, and I don't. They know I don't really consider myself like a prima donna who they can't talk to, and there are plenty in my field who in this field who are that kind of way, and that's fine, whatever. But I like to collaborate with my editors and again, that's another thing that I learned, I think, from my athletic career is the value of coaching. I always had coaches, and I always had coaches that I listened to, and I was really like under their wing, sort of, and I continued that into my journalism career, where I just, like, my mentors, and I really actively sought mentors at every paper I was at, and I mean, I still have mentors. I still have people that I, like, check in with regularly, and you know, most of them they're actually all now retired, but they were the ones that like really brought me up, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And I just love to go to them, and sometimes they might offer, you know, they'll offer advice and help on a story. And so just that learning, it's just staying open. I definitely just keep you know, my wife's an educator, and she talks a lot about having a growth mindset. And so I try to really bring that into what I'm doing. By no means do I think that I'm the finished product, and or that my stories are perfect. And oh my God, sometimes I'm just embarrassed. Sometimes I'll write stories, even today, you know, it's, oh man, I hope nobody reads this. It's like, you know, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. And I think maybe if you can tell yourself that's okay, and also just, you know, and also find a way to continue to be critical of yourself, but while knowing that you're gonna also write some stinkers, you know, I think that's okay I think that's helpful in a way. It's been helpful for me.
How do you keep your confidence up, you know, in the face, say you have a story that you're not happy with, but you got to write another story 2 days later or 3 days later.
Yeah.
How do you recover your confidence?
No, that is a trick. That's a tough one, because as much as I'm saying like I love having a growth mindset and everything, I can also get really down on myself and really critical. And it's finding the balance is sort of like the, you know, the inner game of this business. It's just, okay, take a deep breath, you know, you got another shot. You know, it was that last one's over, and just remind yourself that you know what to do, and you can do this. You've done it before. And also kind of your basic principles for, you know, finding good stories, and then the writing of them. You know, I have some, you know, pretty firm ideas about how I want to write, and so I just try to go back to those. And I mean, with my writing, I try to be pretty simple. I mean, that's pretty much my philosophy is, you know, really clean and simple, and not complicated. So my stories, I don't want my stories to be hard reads. I want them to be smooth, easy reads that, you know, and I know the things that I want in the stories. I want to, you know, as much as I can, I want to show and not tell, and all that kind of stuff. So I just try to focus on those basics when my confidence is shook, and it does get shook. There's no doubt about it.
We're at a moment in, you know, journalistic, you know, history, when journalists are under attack, sports athletes are under attack, and the journalist has to still operate in an environment of hostility. And how do you manage that, knowing that, you know, in your position, you're revealing, you know, the innermost identities of the athletes you cover or the people you cover, and at a moment in time when there's pushback against all that sort of revelation about folks. How does that operate for you, Kurt?
I have come to the point where I just don't, I just let it fall. It's like water off my back. I don't even pay it any mind, because I can't. I know people that get really, you can really go down the rabbit hole. You get attacked on Twitter or social media or Instagram, what have you. You get people commenting on your stories, you know, in the online section, like say for the New York Times, for the comments section. And some people, if you allow yourself to, you can just get dragged down into the abyss, and it can just talk about shaking you. It can become just its own burden, and the work is already hard enough. So my thing is, I don't pay attention. I mean, I'll sort of check out some of the comments, you know, and but I don't let the negative ones affect me at all. I never get into Twitter spats or argue with people, or even try to go down that hole. I know, again, a lot of people do, and it can get you fired. You know, people, you know, it's just not worth it. I mean, to let somebody else I just look at it like that's great if they have their whatever opinion. I'm just going to do my best, and I'm not going to pay attention to it. And I got to say, I learned this a little bit the hard way because when I was maybe earlier in my career, I did get into some of that stuff, and I did get into some spats with people online, and oh yeah, well then well how come I just found. I just took a step back and, this is just stupid. Like I'm just not, all I'm going to say is positive stuff pretty much. Like you're either going to hear me like say nothing or like, hey, if somebody's criticizing me, the most I'll say is, well, that's interesting. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your opinion. And I'm just going to take the high road at every turn. And that's what I do. I either don't respond or I take the high road at all times. It's just not worth it. I mean, I'm trying my best, and I know that, and that's all I can give. It seems like it's getting darker and darker. It's like, oh, can you guys still see me? I'm moving this light around, but okay.
It's fine.
Okay, so that's my whole thing. I mean, I know that can be tough. But I just find that's again, it's part of the inner game. Like what's going to be the best benefit in the end for you and your mental health and your sanity? It's not worth it to get into just because it's like seems like everybody's so pissed off and everybody the things that people will say about somebody online that they would never say to somebody in front of their face, or let's say if they actually got the chance to know me or I got a chance to know them, they wouldn't. It's just dumb. And then in my position too, I've had plenty of racist stuff said towards me, and I mean I've had some really really vile racism directed at me in the past, and again even that is just whatever. Move on. Doesn't bother me. I mean,
and now you're covering incidents of racism and hate, etc. in sports. How do you navigate that? And because you're interested in covering those stories. I mean, how important is that now relative to 5 years ago or even 10 years ago to your perspectives?
Well, I mean, God, I mean, all this stuff, it's great. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to be a columnist is that, when I applied for that, I was a feature writer, right? And then I was writing some essays, and then I applied for this job in the summer. And for a long time, I wasn't really sure if I was going to apply to be the Sports of the Times columnist. But I looked at it like, man, if there's ever going to be a time to do this, in a time where I could use my voice to like weigh in on these important social issues that I really care about, race, gender, just general equality, and kind of looking at sports in maybe a different sort of way. And then now's the time. So now, I'm definitely on the lookout, and I'm going to just, try to put my nose in it whenever I can. It's just really important, and it's just on everybody's mind. And the days when I think people looked askance at, writing about this stuff, that's over. Right? That's over. Now, we know sports is not divorced from the rest of society and the rest of culture. And I find that just really exciting. That's exactly the way I've always looked at it. That's the way I looked at it when I was playing tennis and I was 15 years old or 16 years old when I, met Arthur Ashe, so it's exciting. It's exciting. And at the same time, I don't want that to be all that I'm doing. So I don't want to just be the guy like writing like, entirely about, these social issues at all times. And just that, I think it's important in this position to try to have some variation and as much as I can. So,
Bonsa, you had a question?
I think you and I are on the same page, Rich, because you asked all the questions I was gonna ask. But I do have one. I do
Yeah.
have one. First of all, it's really great to hear your story, Mr. Streeter. It's
Can
actually really cool. And the thing is, you have such
wait.
a very
Call me
all right,
Kurt now.
all right,
It
you got it, Kurt.
makes me feel too old.
So, I mean, your story is so unique because your dad was one of the first black athletes in Oregon. Your
Yeah.
parents are biracial, which was not a common thing back in the 50s, early 60s. And tennis is not really known as a stereotypically black person sport, and yet you were the first black captain of your tennis team at Berkeley. So, when you look at all your experiences from your family, yourself, and you see how sports and racial relations have evolved, what have you seen, whether it's for good or it could be better? What is your perception about how sports and racial relations have evolved?
Wow, that's a great question. I've always been really optimistic about things and how things have changed. And I've always tried to look at it optimistically as much as I could, even for all the problems that I had. And I mean, I remember when I was a kid being embarrassed at times to be seen with my tennis rackets, and or because just even that just really wasn't expected, or taking a lot of hits from like my black friends, like, what are you doing playing tennis when you should be playing hoops or whatever. And I think with my frame, I could have played football. I could have played a lot of things. And so that was pretty hard. And then I started seeing a change where it was like, we're seeing then Serena, let's just using tennis as an example, seeing Serena, and we're seeing, a lot more acceptance and just let's say that in that world. And then we're starting, I felt like we're really going in the right direction for a long time. And then, man, talk about being shook. I mean, I think these last few years they've been pretty rough. It's been a real, I wouldn't say necessarily a wake up call, because as much as I've been optimistic, I've also, I think, realized the kind of the deeper reality that exists in this country. And I think especially through my reporting, my non-sports reporting, I've had a lot of experience, in some really tough situations, and seeing and writing about some really tough situations. I spent a lot of time covering South LA and East LA, um, and I really wanted to, because I didn't grow up in those communities. So again, it's part of a sort of a journey for myself, self discovery, or learning, sort of to really go into those communities, and end up being accepted in those communities as somebody that's like telling the stories with some truth and some heart, was really important to me and really felt good. So I'm very, very well aware of all the deep problems in our culture. But yeah, it's hard to keep myself from being pessimistic, seeing where we're at right now,
Hmm.
with the political situation. But then at the same time, it's always mixed, because then you see all the athletes speaking out the way that they are, which I really applaud, and I really think is amazing. And I mean, all the stuff that happened with the walkouts, and athletes are just not having it anymore. I mean, they're demanding to be seen for their full humanity, as they absolutely should, and they're demanding, better for the communities that they're connected to. So that's an absolute positive. But so I know there's the positives, and then there's society struggling as well. So I don't know what. I guess I'm of both minds. Yeah.
So when you say that and you seen how all of this transfers to the sports journalism side of things, and
Yeah.
how everything is so heightened now in terms of all the political discord and chaos and all that's going on, and how it transfers to the sports world. When you look at an aspiring journalist, whether it's a writer or a TV guy or a radio guy or gal, especially someone of a minority racial group,
Yeah.
when they enter the journalism world in the middle of this heightened tension of racial injustice and the demonization of media, what advice would you give them through what you've learned and how they should approach the journalism field, whether it's covering sports or covering sports stories that are connected to the racial problems of the world?
Well, I think just don't be deterred. I mean, I think that right now for people of color trying to enter into the business, of course, the business is really going through unbelievable shakedown where things are changing, people are losing jobs. And I mean, you guys are all very well aware of the atmosphere right now, just overall, right? But I think for people of color, I think it's never been better. I think because there's an understanding, finally, there's a deep understanding that newsrooms have to change, and that obviously we just need more representation all the way around, because it makes it better. It makes the overall report just that much strong, the way it should be, with people that understand communities and have different viewpoints than just like the standard white male viewpoint that was there for forever, really, right? So I think take heart in that. I mean, there's just no doubt. There's no doubt that my career, I think, has been helped by the fact that I'm Black, right? So for me at least, it helps. I mean, first of all, you got to be good, right? So, but I think that for me, I've been. I mean, it just makes me different, and I've always worked for companies that then valued the fact that they didn't have enough people like me, and so they knew they needed to either keep me or to try to help me to be better, and I didn't shy away from that. I mean, in a way, you kind of feel guilty because I don't know, God, well, would it be the same if I'm a white guy or whatever? But then, I know I'm good, first of all, right? I know I'm good. I know I'm really diligent and I really care. And I'm always going to work my ass off. B, I look at it like, I mean, they weren't letting, my dad barely, was able to do, he was lucky and to be able to do his job. My grandpa wouldn't have been allowed inside the doors. So I'm not really feeling that bad about any kind of boost that I've had because of race, and I think just make anybody who's person of color or female, or any female or women reporters never feel bad about making yourself known and doing what you do. Super important. We just need more. We need more representation on all fronts. People with disabilities. We just need more. We just need more reflection of our whole society. And I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I'm kind of going off on riffs today. I had a lot of coffee this morning.
No, I mean, you answered it.
Yeah.
No, there's truth, Kurt. That's truth.
Yeah.
That's important. Any other questions for Kurt? I'm looking. Just speak up because I see most of you, but I don't see everybody on my screen.
I have
Stephen and Garrett have their hands up.
Okay.
So Kurt, I saw your child just now. So I'm curious from a parent standpoint, as a feature writer, having to spend all this time with different people, trying to get to know them and really kind of immerse yourself in who they are. How do you balance that work-life balance, having to go out and be with these people and then come home to your family and really just have your personal life?
Man, that's a great question. I'm going to have my wife come up and answer that question. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I think for my family, they definitely feel it, and they don't get all of me at all times. I mean, I'm gone probably more than most dads who in my son's circle. I'm more like a doctor kind of, like on call, and in a regular situation without, in regular life without COVID, I was traveling last year. I think I traveled like 3 or 4 months out of the year. So I was gone a lot. It's tough. It requires a lot of sacrifice. And even though I'm home now and haven't been traveling, I'm either working, I work a lot, and when I don't work, I have a hard time sometimes like getting it out of my mind. So I battle like being fully present with my family, because oh God, what's my next story going to be? Or let's say last weekend I wrote a story, and oftentimes it'll take me about a day or two. I'm just worried that, oh, did I screw something up? I can't get those thoughts out of my mind. Like, did I mess up? Did I get the spelling right on that guy's name? And I'll scramble back to check, like, 3 minutes before we're going to publish. And like, and then once it's published, I don't know, what's gonna, is this any good? And I don't know. So there's always it's a battle. It's a challenge. I don't have any great thoughts on that, other than just, I try to be with my son and my wife as much as I can. It does limit my life in some ways, because then that means I can't do some of the other things that I maybe would normally do with a normal type of job. But it's not a normal type job. I think you gotta, going into this business, if you're, most likely, especially if you're doing it at a pretty high level, it's not going to be 9 to 5 by any means. And that's just it helps if your partner understands that. But my partner understands that too, and it's still hard on her. And it's hard on my son. I don't have any great answers, other than just, I just try to give them as much love as I can, as much of me as I can, but I'm still working on that too, no doubt.
Awesome, thank you.
The one thing I will say though, like if I was working in some other field, I don't know that I'd be as happy. I'm also just really, I love my job. So, and I think my wife understands too, that it's like sort of that it's kind of a deeper calling, that I'm doing it to try to. It's nice to be in something where you feel like you're putting something out there that can help the world in some sense, in some way, rather than just I don't know, not to put down salespeople or something like that, but I'm not just doing sales. Like, it's something that's like that's something broader than just me. And my wife looks at it that way too. And that when she takes that mindset, then that helps her to be understanding of my long hours, or not always being there. So.
Garrett, you had a question?
Yeah, at one point you had been talking about being like a fly on the wall, and I've always struggled with, thinking I'm wasting someone's time. And I of course, I know, we're journalists, it's not something like someone's going to automatically get something back from it. It's not like a one service to one person, another service to another, or money. So how do you go about having these long kind of conversations, where you spend a couple days with people and really, I don't know, how do you just approach that, and how do you get people to kind of give you that time too? Because that's and the time, and then the comfortability to kind of let you walk around in their lives.
Yeah. Wow. First of all, I think it's just being able to connect, showing again, just interest, curiosity, that you're trying to understand what they're going through, and that you're willing to listen. I think a lot of people, they love that. They love having somebody around to they want somebody to talk to. We're all struggling kind of to find connection in this world. And I found that by me just being open to their experiences and not being judgmental, the next thing you know, pretty soon people really enjoy that, in the way that I gotta say, in a lot of cases, it ends up like I'm almost like their therapist. Like they look forward to me coming and like being around, because I'm not really like I don't really. I just show, I think, a warmness to them, and that's what I try to. And that's just how I generally feel. So it's not a put on. Also, look, I mean, sometimes a lot of times people understand the value of, well, this person's doing a story on me, what that could mean for our life, for whatever so when I hung out with Rodney King before he died, and the year before he died, he had a book coming out soon. So I think he realized that a story in the LA Times wasn't exactly going to be bad for him, and then he actually got to know me, and then he liked having me over. So there I was hanging out with Rodney King, at his house in Rialto, California, and going over to his house, at 10 in the morning, on a weekend, and he's jabbing me for being a square, and how, yeah, you're the squarest brother I ever met, just like, and he's offering me, vodka and orange juice, and, at 9:30, 10 in the morning. And he's showing me all his tricks he uses for like disguising when he's been drinking, put the toothpaste on I remember him showing me all these tricks. And then we're just, whatever, we just kind of became hanging buddies in a way. But, but he liked that because like I listened to his story. I don't think he had anybody to really tell his story and to really like hear about his fears and hear about like his nightmares, and he really felt that kind of with him. And so, yeah, it's sort of that combination of, it's sort of transactional in a way, but then it's also, wow, this person's showing interest in me. Oh, okay, well, this is kind of cool. And next thing you know, they're just sort of expecting you to be there. And that to me is the best. I mean, I got to say, so being a columnist is great and all, but my stories now are almost always going to be like in the 1,950 word range, and they're going to have a lot of opinion. And I can't build stories the way that I did when I was just doing the features. So I'm going to try to do occasionally, the stories like the Coach Adams story as much as I can, but it's going to be few and far between. And I'm definitely going to miss that aspect of it, of the work. But just hang in there. And then also another thing too, last thing too, you just have to kind of explain like what you'd be looking for. Like, I would tell like, so I'm really interested in telling your story, and I think this is what I see out of what you're doing, and so what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is I'd like to come and just kind of hang out with you every Tuesday for like the next month, and while you're doing your job, and I'll just maybe be over in that corner, and you mind if I just kind of observe, and then maybe afterwards I'll maybe we'll go to lunch. And so that whole thing, and well, sure, yeah, come on by, and then a month later I've got all this story with this person. So yeah, that's how to go about it. I've actually I do have to get going pretty soon. So can we do like maybe the last question, and if there is one?
Yeah, one more question, anybody? Oh, well, Kurt, we can't thank you enough for your time and lessons. Just to summarize, I think you said everything is important, but what really sticks out is who you are. And you mentioned about, and I'll just quote you directly, about truth and heart, and you use the expression full humanity. That's the greatest lesson a journalist can learn in how to write a story. Truth with heart, and just express the full humanity of what you're writing about. And we should put your words on our campus, above an arch. We have the First Amendment and we all get it, but what really matters at the end of the day is truth and heart and full humanity. And we thank you for delivering that message to us.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you all, and good luck. Good luck. Reach out to me if you need in the future, anytime.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you. Thanks a million.